It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.
Episode 61 of the Lekker Rugby Pod. Welcome back to everyone. Harry's back with us to talk about the rising new stars in the world rugby. France has got a big plan to become the dominant force in rugby. Before we get to Harry, though, remember to please subscribe to this channel. We need you and it'll be growing nicely. So welcome back, Harry. A nice topic to go into the weekend, the final weekend of the Six Nations with. Is France really capable of beating the Springboks now? Or is it still a bit early to talk about that?
Yeah, we should take them seriously. They are, the word for ominous in French is sinister, so sinister, and I like it. I like the idea of it being sinister. There's lots of different angles to pick there. First of all, before anyone jumps on us, the French have already beaten us many times. They tend to beat us in November on their home patch, and they obviously failed in the quarterfinal in their own patch. Famously, 2023. So there's, this and that, the overall record over the long port for 100 years. It's very much pro-Bok, but not as much as you think. Of all the teams that have done the best touring South Africa, it would be the French, actually, that are really good at being tourists. Nowadays, they don't because their top 14 schedule doesn't really, it's not amenable. And that's a blessing and a curse for France. The blessing is that they blood a lot of new players in their summers. So where other teams like Ireland will send their top team down and try to win the series in South Africa and, break our arms and break their legs and overplay guys who are 33, 34. The French don't do that. But they also then find, their next Guillard, the phenomenal lock. They find really good players because they send people, they're going to send an A-B squad down to New Zealand. And over time, that will enable them to harvest the next group. So that's one big angle we should talk about, which is let's acknowledge that every team does things differently. And of all the teams that do things differently on the top tier, it's the French. So that's born of several factors. Number one, they got a different club schedule. It's massively funded. So who's going to walk away from 50 million euros and an extra 10 million euros here and there from broadcast deals? So they have to worship and elevate and sanctify their club competition, which goes very long. It's 24 rounds, 26 rounds, and they have the Champions Cup. So the players are overplayed. We always talk about overplayed. They overplayed too. Bigger squads so they can do home and aways, but it still adds up. So when it comes time for June, July, they're not going to send all their best players to go tour Argentina, tour us, and tour New Zealand. They're just not going to. There's no power we have in World Rugby to make them. They don't feel ashamed by it or embarrassed by it. It's a strategy. And the strategy is long-term thinking, which is that if they can stand up their leagues, make maximum money, be able to then lure and sign either youngsters straight off the paddock from Grey College and Bloemfontein, and they're harvesting 16-year-olds from Australia now because they don't mind getting big athletes who are not great rugby players. They actually just want to get size, power, pace into the French system. The French system, second angle, French system is really built around clubs. You're going to get some people on our channel who comment in there and say, I'm from a place in near Toulon that has schools rugby. I'm telling you, 98% of rugby when you're 16, 15, 14, when Gelange, Aldrit, and Dupont were all friends and playing together. They're playing in a club. The club is after school. School's long, very hard in France. You're dead by the end. You have to go at night. But the clubs are like social. They got a pool. They've got a barbecue. They've got a braai. They've got there's women and men joining for tennis as well and racket sports and boxing. It's a whole thing. But you have to go to clubs. And so that's a blessing and curse as well. The blessing is you can harvest talent, find talent from anywhere around the world, attached to a club. You don't have to do an artificial thing where you're going to go to Portruis, you're going to go to Grey College, you're going to go to Bishops. You can just go to a club. And so you can find people that are not in private schools. You can find more ethnic diversity. You don't have to have been from a family that's a rugby family that, lives on a wineland. Okay, so that's actually a blessing. The curse is that you cannot grab people at 6, 8, 9, 10 years old and kind of force them into rugby. Also, parts of France like Lille or Paris, rugby's not really a thing that much. It's number 5. Basketball, football, it's way up there. And so when you get to the South, the heartlands, that's where you're going to get it. But they have such a great population and so much money in the game that they're still able to find power athletes and pace athletes, get them away from football, get them away from, as they call it, basket, and in towards rugby. All of this has conspired to create a juggernaut. The juggernaut of France is interesting because it hasn't won the big one, and because it tends to exist in the ecosphere of club rugby, it can be minimized by a lot of us. I mean, Bok fans in particular, All Black fans. We can go, yo, but we can do the but. Yo, but where were you in this and that? And the solution is, if you look at the performances in the Northern Hemisphere in World Cups, even though England won it, France has had the most consistent and dangerous record. They've gotten to the finals a lot. They've always qualified. They've been a tough out. They've beaten New Zealand in knockouts. They're a proper team. The problem for them was always, could they time it right? Could they age profile it right? Could they get the right coach? Because the national coaches are often not as good as the club coaches in France, because club comes first, then country. Could you mount a challenge where country became important enough where we'd subordinate all other things to the national cause, the way we have sort of easily with Erasmus, Farrell, easily in Ireland? But could you do that in France where country was king? And could you then age profile it well enough? And I've gone across and looked at 2015, 2019, 2023, and then projected 27. What's interesting to me is that when you look at the French approach now, what they've built, their color scheme, their age scheme, and their arrows are better than everyone else's. Ours is tilts a little bit strongly to 2015 in that you have Pollard, Dialende, Creel, Maraba, Etzebeth, Dutoy, Kulisi, Leroux, all from the origin of 2015, and then they go all the way across. They see off their challengers, they survive, and here they are. But can they hang on for one more? You look at Ireland, it's kind of similar in that you have an aging out. They're too young and too old at the same time. They have extreme edges on the side here on game management, but they have like really old age warriors. All Blacks, not as many as the Boks hanging over from 2015. That was their greatest generation, and it did kind of go away. But they haven't blooded enough to get to that magic 900 cap, average age 27 type of profile. And so you look at the French, you go, wow. In 2015, there's only one player from that entire group, Slimani, who is playing for Leinster now. He's a marginal player now, but everyone else is gone. Spedding, Fofana, Dulin, Michalak that we know, Morgan Parra we remember, Leroux from South Africa, who was playing flank, Dusatois, a nightmare, a great player, Maestri, Pickamoles, that big player, the big 8 with the big bomb, Girardo. Those are all gone. Then you go forward to 2019, and similarly, some of those have been jettisoned already. Maxime Medard, Fakatawa, Huguet, Loré, Poirot. Those are all gone. So it's interesting that a lot of their meat starts to happen in the tail end of 2019. These are young players, Dupont, Peno, Intermac, Crow, Baldrit, Olivon, Jagou. These all guys start to come in 2019. They're not good enough in Japan, but they're proper players, and they go to the field of the 800 caps for 2019 in the matches that mattered. By 2023, they hit the quarterfinal at home. They're supposed to win. They don't, but they have 835 caps. But every single one of those guys, that's in 2013, that lost a cruel quarterfinal that would have stuck in their craw, dominated their brain, and motivated them to train a little bit harder forever and ever and ever, they're still there. That means in 2027, when you go down the list of the people who are burning bright from the revenge factor of 2023, Ramos will be 32. Penaud, 31. Fico, 33. Obarasi, 29. Moafana, 27. BLBRE will be 24 only. Intermac, 32. DuPont, 30. Or Legaric, 26. Saran, 33. Old Treat, only a 31 and pretty healthy still. Crow, 33. Boudahon, the new find, 28. Or Jalange, 31 from the last World Cup. Flamont, 30. Miafu, Guillard, Antonio, 37. Or Alighieri, 33. Movaka, 31. Marchand, 32. Gros, 28. And Cyril by 34. That's the whole team right there. But Harry, they're going to have some injuries. Okay, let them have injuries. You just saw their best player get knocked out in a game, and Luku came in and was fine. Luku will be 35 in 2027. They have Legaric and Saran, so they have plenty of cover. If you don't like Intermac, they got Jalibert. If you don't like, Bielberry, they've got Villiers. They've got people all over the park. The point is, France looked at what South Africa did and absorbed a valuable lesson. They do it their own way. They're not just copycats, but they absorbed a valuable lesson, which is go 3 deep in your depth chart, get some continuity, but always blood players in the right spots, the skill position, the excitement machines, get them in there, trust them. Throw a Louis Bielberry in the mix at 21, 22. It's okay. Next thing is go 7-1. They went 7-1 last week. They're going 7-1 this week. Again, in the most crucial match against Scotland, where if they lose, they actually, they celebrated too early, and it's a whole disaster for them. They have to win. They're putting 7-1. So in a must-win match, they're acting very buckish. It's not like the French did 7-1 for years. So if you come at me with the comments and go, no, we're not copying you. Yes, you kind of are. It's okay. The question is, can you do it? And the answer is yes, because it's not that the French need Emmanuel Miafu to make a 7-1 work. I mean, he's good, he's big. The reason why the French can do the 7-1 is because they have Kouacha forwards, they have Dion Ferry forwards, they have Gigoux playing at center, so they can handle the hybridness. Great comments last week from our French followers talking about how many of the forwards played in the backs when they were in club rugby, youth club. That was brilliant. I didn't know that there were that many. Doesn't surprise me, I suppose, because of the way the French like to play rugby. So handling, but the French play proper, in your face, smash mouth rugby as well. They maul 17.5 meters a game with Six Nations. Irish are mustering 5. Again, it's not putting it over the try line so much, it's creating this incredibly tiring, demoralizing, dare we say, Springbok style, where I'm going to just push you back enough where your legs are gone. 9 mauls, as our friend Ringo pointed out, almost superfluously, like even from a kickoff restart, let's just do a maul. And they just maul the Irish to death. They don't go long in phases. They go to the second receiver less than anyone, far less than the Irish. They don't go wide. You see highlights of the French scoring wide tries, but they don't go wide as a phase pattern. They don't overplay. The quarterfinal that we remember against the Boks was unusual because the French kind of played them, so they punched themselves out in the first hour. They're not going to do that again. Some teams suffer a terrible loss like England did in 2019, the final, try to copy by, hiring Matt Proudfoot and trying to, set up a kick chase game. And they almost lose their way because they're copying their victor too much. They get too much away from their DNA and they don't know that it's not that easy to copy someone. You should copy, whoever's good. That's true in life. But you must always then still adapt it to your own style. I fancy that Ireland didn't try to do that, against New Zealand. They kept their own style. They're just running out of bodies. They're running out of horse flesh. They don't know how to create that. And there's only so many James Lowe's, Jameson Gibson Parks and Mac Hansons that you can scoop up and find, they take a long time to develop. And if you're feeding off of mostly private schools in Ireland, and you're competing with, GAA hurling and Gaelic football for the big power athletes, and you're a small island with not a lot of people, you cannot necessarily change styles. You got to stick with your style, which is, hands, skills, angles, phases. And then, when you do that, and you're Caelan Doris, you get over the line, you get held up because of power. When you're Ireland and you're running into brick walls, power. When you're Ireland and you run up against a 7-1 and it's just too much power, you get overpowered. What do? How do you restock? Don't know. France is different. I think the reports are that Galtier went into a hole after the quarterfinal loss, wouldn't talk to people, disappeared, was gloomy, depressed. You had players having eating disorders, apparently. This is public. I'm not saying anything, nasty. Demoralized. You have Donty saying even now he would not have a beer with Peter Steph Toy. You have Midi Olympic doing a leak and saying that there were 5 material errors, neglecting to say there was 3 twos, so it was tiny. And all of them are sliding doors moments. So if you caught this guy, this, not taking the loss properly. And then it was the clubs who did an intervention with Galtier and said, you got to stop this because you're making everyone depressed and you're sending players back from national setup worse than better because they're all still, woe is me, pathetic, the world is against us. Galtier takes it on, good man. He says, you're right, we got to go double down. But instead of being happy boy, what he does is he just turns it into like, we haven't got enough respect and it's a grim, sinister, ominous mission where they're going to try to dominate the world. And so when you see the fruits of his labor in this Six Nations tournament and also in November, where they played really well and really hard and did well against All Blacks. I think the French approached the Six Nations and said, now you're going to see, fuck around and find out. So what we're going to do is we're going to set a scoring record. We're entering the final round and knowing pretty much that they're going to break that scoring record for the Six Nations of any team ever. Scoring tries at will, but doing proper best set pieces, turnover derived tries, as Andre Pretorius pointed out, how ready they are to go, how they do wild dog defense, which is, just like a pack of wild dogs, which they don't go on everything. They wait, boom, pounce. They wait until the numbers favor them. They counter ruck the moment. They're very good now at switching on off. And so the big question becomes between you and me, and is it going to work? Is it going to work at Six Nations level? Of course it is. It's working in front of our eyes. They have to close the deal against Scotland, and wouldn't it just be so ironic and strange and funny for probably a British and Irish Lions dominated backline? Blair Kinghorn, who plays in France, Finn Russell, who played in Paris for a long time, Hugh Jones, who almost plays like a Frenchman. Looks like one really, and then you have Tom Jordan, so they have a very handsome back line, and then you have Duan van der Merwe, as we always call him, the Afrikaner on Android. What if they run amok? What if the French invite them in a moment of madness, the way that Ramos did to Stuart Hogg back in the day and lost the game they should have won? What if they go that way? And you think maybe the prior version of the French would have. I don't see it happening this time. I see the French being ruthless, and they're embracing their ruthlessness. And David Lowe, the dad of Alec Lowe, that was what he said to me this week in a WhatsApp discussion. He says that now they're ruthless. It is ominous. It is ominous what they're building, because they're building 4 deep. They can lose their best player of their history, of the French history, and play their best game. Does that remind you of anyone? It reminds me of box, which is no one is bigger than a team. If that was the case before, if we were too dependent, we're going to get rid of that. We have a whole year now without him. So everyone step up. Let's explore different styles. Let's win different ways. And let's be scary. That's what the French are brewing in their mixology lab right now. They're a planning nation. They are engineering dominated. Weapon systems, car manufacture, road construction, the best, sort of meticulous planners. And then you align that with some madness underneath the surface where you have Ramos offloading, going backwards on the ground to Louis Bielri, who scuffles and shuffles, almost falls down, miskicks a kick across the face of the goal line to his friend Damien Pinot, who scuffs a kick, and it's a 50-meter exit. You're like, wow, did you draw that up in practice? No. What is happening now is you have this weird mixture of Galtier's grim, ruthless, meticulous, vengeful planning to dominate the world and show the club coaches they can shut up now and let him take charge, mixed with the joy and abandon and craziness and the fun and the fun factor of what they can bring on the field as well. And I'm telling you right now, it's a strange mix. Are we being sort of Monday morning and saying this now? What would have happened if Ireland took care of business? Hey, well, that's how sport works. One result does matter. And also, before you come at me and say you're elevating the World Cup too much as a cycle and an ultimate, it is the ultimate. It's when everyone's ceilings are exposed. And why was Galtier so depressed? Okay, so it is. It's the everything, and it's anyone who's saying it's not just hasn't won it yet. So yeah. The minute they win it, then they're going to say it is the ultimate. So it is the thing that is haunting. It's haunting the French team that in France, in a place they were supposed to win with the same group we're talking about that's going to be good in 2027, but they were already there in 2023. That is the ultimate vindication, or it's going to be the judgment. It'll be the final reckoning. Will they have some injuries? Sure. Ntamak has had long periods sidelined, just like Andre Pollard did. So, it's going to come down to those matters. Everyone loses people, There were people that were out for the quarterfinal in France, but Malcolm Marx, who was probably the best buck forward in form-wise the year before, in 2022, was out. Everyone loses people. People get carded. Etzebeth was carded. On the night he was the best forward, but he was carded. So everything kind of work out its own way. What we're looking at is a proper train smash waiting for us in 2027, where All Blacks will be very close proximity, almost feel like they're playing at home in Australia. They play there so much. The French having the best age profile. I mean, you'll flash this up for the viewers, but this is ominous. Mm-hmm. This light French blue that takes over the entire, that's scary. Our green and gold doesn't look as good if you just plot it in the same manner. Ours is more loaded a little bit more to 2023. So we have a lot of work to do. I've got questions though, which I'm happy to indulge in, but I'll ask you now. After that ramble rant, what are the questions you have about this French bid for world dominance?
Well, the first question I have is, why doesn't Rassie grow a mustache? I'm going to start a petition, because ever since Galtier started growing a mustache, they haven't lost much. I think 95% win rate. So that's the first thing. The thing that I wanted to...
Rassie would grow like a Fu Manchu, like a long one.
Like a little twirl at the end, man. Evil one. Can you imagine? What are you up to? Yeah, I'm joking, but I mean, I think what I would, if I was Rassie and I was thinking about the French, I would think, why did they beat Ireland? Because you mentioned before, they figured out Ireland. They figured out how to beat Ireland. And Andre mentioned it, you mentioned it. They couldn't get over the gain line. They couldn't win the aerial ball. They couldn't just, Andre did that one little line. They just could never get over that line. They just kept pulling them back, killed their legs, and then started just dominating them. So if I was Rassie, I would think, what would they identify? And I want to ask you this question. What would they see a Springbok potential weakness as that they can focus on? Because you mentioned you did a little bit of a trial where you tested teams, how can they beat each other, and what they were focusing on. Talk to me about that, and what you think the Springbok weaknesses are that France could exploit, and then how can we counter that, and then obviously vice versa.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, because you talk about the top four. There's a real top four, and England's trying to elbow its way in. First of all, England has elbowed its way into the top three of the Six Nations. So for 4 years now, it's been the top two to everyone else. kind of a top two, and then England and Scotland would sort of battle out and then bottom two. But now England is absolutely in the top three with every chance of finishing above Ireland. So we should tip our hat to England doing it England way, which is, and they're better at the gain line than Ireland. They're better at scrums. They're better at line outs. They have finished their breaks better. And by the way, those three teams against each other in the last 4 times, they're 2-2. Everyone's 2 wins and 2 losses against each other. But the French are ahead of both. Let's say that. And if you just look at 2-year period of time, and you look at particularly this season, the French have gone one more level up. Their ceiling is higher on the combat side of rugby. The brutality side, they can actually go places, into dark places that the Irish cannot. And the Irish can do it for a game. Durban, let's break everyone's arms and legs. Let's break our own arms and legs. Let's break everything and just see what happens, and then drop goal away to wins. They should have dropped gold more in Dublin, by the way. And while they were down there, just notched those sport. You would think that Johnny Sexton's only difference to Sam Prendergast would have been putting points on the board when you're down there for 12, 13 minutes. By hook or by crook. Doesn't matter. Take the threes. Get it. If you get to 12-6 or 12-9 or 9, it's different. It's different for the French too. But the Irish should not have been able to do that back-to-back in a tournament, which is what a World Cup looks like. You win 13-8 in a pool match against the Springboks, and it's almost like going off the field, the Springboks looked like they could play another game right then. And Ireland was done. They were incredibly excited and happy, but they were kind of done. Whereas you knew that there was still levels to go to on kicking game, on making your kicks, on finishing. If you're on the try line at the end with a maul, you got to finish that, then you win the game, and it's a different story. So there's all those kind of permutations. But let's just say that between the 4, every one of the top 4 has an awkward opponent. For ours right now, it's Ireland. We've kind of figured out how to win against the All Blacks consistently. Now we're going to take it to the next level of go to Eden Park and see if we can do it there. But we satisfied ourselves that we know what that's like. We could even maybe not throw a match in New Zealand, but bring in new players and not worry too much about our ability to beat them in 2026 and 27. We absolutely know how to beat the French, but more on that in a second. We struggle against Ireland. We have not done as well as we should against Ireland. The French have figured out a way to beat New Zealand, and they were also struggling against Ireland, but they flipped that script. But it's not clear when everyone's got all their nuts in a bag and everyone's got all their big boys and everyone's playing for everything that they know how to consistently beat the Boks. I see that in their eyes when I'm talking to them in France, and behind it I go, I don't believe you. Going into the knockout match in the quarterfinal, I just kept telling everyone around me in French and English, we're going to knock you out. We're going to knock you out tonight. And I really knew it was going to happen. And it was fun to watch their doubt become certainty, become fear, become agony. That was fun. That's a good thing. We like that. Now they want to find a way to do that to us. And so this is the big topic I want to kind of cover is how do you get over the hump? They just did it against Ireland, which is very interesting because they had really struggled to beat a team that they really were superior to in combat collision gain line. Why did they keep losing? How did they do it, right? And it was about being efficient. It was about having your moments. It's about being a wildcat on attack and a wild dog on defense. But in moments, not running everywhere all the time with your hair on fire and then playing yourself out. So it was a triumph for street savvy, a good barroom brawler versus a guy at his first fight in the pub. And then Ireland couldn't live with them if they constructed that template. I'll make you play a kind of game that you don't want to play. That's what the French did. And that's ominous because that means they're going to think the same thing about the Boks. So how do we make the Springboks play a game, not on the end of year tour in Marseille when we're all dead or we have a red card, just Peter Seftotoy, Gelange still said it was the hardest pack he ever faced in his life. A 7-man pack, including Quacha. I'm talking about when it's really proper in a World Cup, when everyone's really squared away. I don't think they believe right now that they're the better team. I don't think that. I think they are smart and honest enough inside their camp to know that they have to prove it. The Springboks right now would go into that matchup in Australia 2027 against France in a semi-final, and they would believe. Not cocky, not arrogant. I'm just saying they would believe they would win. They would find a way to win. They would find a way. Something would happen. And it's that one thing, which is the belief, that can switch in a moment. And that's why it's so beautiful in sport. DuPont goes down. The nightmare happens in your 7-1. Barassi, everything is going wrong. And then not only do you win, you literally like kick their arse. I mean, you just, without the consolation tries, which made Sean Edwards really mad. I mean, France was holding Irish heads into the mud, holding them down and making them eat it while they were talking to them about, their mother and father. It was a real spanking. That changes things forever. That means that next time in a year, when France plays Ireland, and this time it'll be in Paris, the swagger is different. So we don't have that against us right now. Every time we've lost to the French, and we don't lose. I mean, we beat them more than we lose to them, even though predominantly it's played in France. If we do lose, like the one I just referred to in Marseille, where Peter Steph Toy was also shoved into someone, shunted in by Quapa, red card early. There's enough there where we go, we were a couple of points here and there. When does Peter Steph get red carded? Never. Is it going to happen again? And so we just kind of take away like, we can up our levels. We didn't even have a proper, number 10 or we can just say that something was different. And then when push comes to shove in the quarterfinals, then we go, see, told you, that's what I meant. When it was all there and you guys were trying to build phases, we knew that you would knock on or we'd strip it, or that we just knew. It wasn't that complicated to know. I think the French are building a system now where they want to take that and change it. For example, I think they would like to beat us solidly in November, but put us to the sword. And then that would change things. That's the horrible thought, isn't it? And you look across the team, you go, well, they could do it if they could figure out a way to make us play bad. Because there's two ways to beat someone in sports. One is, I do what I do best, you do what you do best, but my best is better than your best, and then I win. Another way is to say, I don't know if you're better, I don't know who's better or worse, but I want to make you play your worst day, and then I don't have to be my best to beat you. So, you've seen the tennis struggle between Nadal, Novak, and Roger. Everyone had their favorite surface. On the actual cumulative score between them over, 15 years was minuscule. It was 51% of points won versus 49% of points won. And then, you have Grand Slam tournaments and so forth. But, when Nadal would win against Federer on the clay, he would make Federer look human. He would lure Roger into exchanges and points that did not favor Roger's style. When Djokovic finally learned how to get over the top, it was because he realized that he needed to lengthen the points and widen the angles and make everything into an athletic contest. When Roger learned to beat Nadal, it was because he realized he needed to play lower instead of higher. It was just things like that. And so the question is there behind the scenes with William Servat and Sean Edwards and Fabien Galtier, Mustachioed Galtier, have they avoided the curse of England 2019 where they almost self-destructed by trying to be too bucky? And have they avoided the downside of other challengers, including the Springboks trying to dethrone the All Blacks in 2011, 2015, where you almost try to copy too much? Or are you better off trying to take away one of your opponent's strengths? That's the big thing. There's a cool YouTube channel that I watch from time to time, or maybe it's on TikTok, where two guys that are really good hunters try to decide which animal would win in a struggle with each other. They would have how many wolverines would it take to overcome a grizzly bear? Or they would say, if you put a lion and a tiger, in there, or if you say, how many dogs, pit bulls would it take to overcome a gorilla? Or they talk about, if you were able to stage a fight between a hippo in a water environment, and the hippo was taking on a rhino who wins, and then flip it around to an open, dry savanna, that kind of stuff. I think it's kind of funny. It's interesting. You get into bite strength and, how ferocious something is, and, how many raccoons would it take to beat a puff adder or whatever. And it's funnier when you have things that don't face each other normally. And I think rugby is a bit like that. That's why the Harry Index exists, is because it's funny to go, I wonder, if you could make these two things face. And so the World Cup comes around not very often, and it piques our interest because we finally get to solve some things. We get to stop talking about it and just show it, just do it. Let's just see. And of all the rugbies that exist, the French one is the most different from all the others. It's different in style. It's different in attack. It's different in the length of the league. It's different in the clubs, or derived instead of the schools. It's different in that how they use a 9. It's different in how they use their flanks. It's different that they're locks or lifters instead of leapers. It's different in how they exit. It's different in how they cheer, how they play music during the match with instruments all the time. The whistle instead of the boo. There's just so many things different. The language, obviously. So I think that's why it's fascinating to see this. I think French have always been fascinated with South African rugby. They feel like kinship, not just from the French Huguenot, origin stories of so many rugby players like Bernard Leroux going from South Africa, and almost, the names themselves, Jean de Villiers, almost making a Frenchman smile as he imagines he would say it, Jean de Villiers. That common root, there's that. Also, that there was so many tours, even, Jean-Pierre Rives with his blood-stained blonde hair, the magic of those 1976 tours, and that they never stopped touring. They never observed any boycotts. I think maybe also the fact that so many players from South Africa ended up playing in France when professionalism first began. And then finally, it's that the two teams maybe have more similarity than any other teams in how they develop their attacks and how they play rugby. They really do love scrums. They are exceptional proponents of the counter ruck. They still really like a lot of argy-bargy handbags and proper fights. There's no league in the world that's tougher than the Pro D2 if you just want to have fights every Saturday. Every team has an enforcer, dedicated, they're just a puncher guy. And it's the kind of place where, Bismarck du Plessis really enjoyed, because it just suited his brand of rugby. So that's the part where you wonder, okay, so the wondering, this is the sort of Wolverine versus wildebeest or whatever, like this is the Cape Buffalo against the, polar bear story, is could the French outbuck the buck? Could the French develop a better 7-1 than we got? Could the French even make a better scrum? Could the French find a way to moor us and have, find that extra little bit that they need? Is that the pathway? Or is that a really recipe for disaster? Is it like one of those things where they think they can do that and then they find out, And my speculation is that it is a doomed endeavor for the French to believe that they will bully their way over the box. I think it is futile, and I want them to try it. And I hope that that's where they put all their dedication. I think they can use their 7-1 and bully Ireland, and they should. They should absolutely do that until the cows come home. They should do it against Scotland. I don't know if it's going to work that well against England. I think, in fact, it might play into England's hands. And I think that it'll make every win over England closer than it should be, and they might even drop a couple. But they should not try to outbuck the buck. I don't think I don't think that when push comes to shove, when it's you, me, my dog, my mother, and you in a foxhole, when it's like who can put their head through more walls, I think they're going to fail. I just don't believe it. I don't believe in the brotherhood. I don't believe that the same "I will die for you" spirit exists. I think that a little bit too emotional still, and can be too affected by a loss. And I don't think they'll bleed for each other quite as much when it all comes down to it. Now that could change over time. They're winning under 20s. They definitely have the strength in the gym. They have the size. They have the power on paper. But when I actually just think it out, and I just think about, but when you're actually battling for your life in the trenches, I don't see it. And I think it's a failed endeavor. What I think they should do is play like they did in Dublin, where you play off 10 and you expose the hammer rush defense of the box more completely and more quickly. If you can make the third pass and get to the outside, I think you've seen that work sometimes. I think the long kick strategy is still the best one against the box. I just think territory, you make box play from deep. We don't like it. And I think that's fair enough. I just don't think that the ability to go toe to toe is going to quite work out for them the way. And there's just moments where you see it. You see Ibn Etabeth taking 3 Frenchmen over the line with him when he wants to. Does he want to do that every day? Can he do it every day? Can you play that way every day? No. He didn't play that way when he was in France. But it was different when you put on the green and gold and you're playing for your country. And Rossi's a master at igniting various psychological motivations as well. And when you're adding Felix in as this just strident, wild voice, along with cool Tony and unflappable Jerry, and Don Human doing his harbor imagery, and an entire country almost saying nothing matters until this. It doesn't matter, now it matters. It's a turn on. The switch goes on for World Cups. And also and it goes on for anyone who challenges us, face to face, man to man, you versus me. That just plays into, I don't know, plays into ancestry. It plays into old ways. It plays into how tough you had to grow up. That it's like, are you really going to frighten a guy like Cheslin Colby or Kurtley Arntzen? I mean, really? Like, do you think that they grew up seeing anything that was scary? And as far as getting into like a proper arm wrestle with someone like, take your pick of any tight forward for the Springboks. I just don't think that actually is the right way to approach them. The Irish have had the most success recently because they keep shifting angles, and it's like you're chasing shadows. And in almost every case that they've won, it's been sort of a grim, tight affair, fair enough, but it hasn't been, they haven't won the scrums. They've been actually decimated in the scrums. And so I think you can waste a lot of time trying to maul drive the box. That's what it looks like the French are building, is a mauling, driving, scrummaging, power 7-1 team. And so it looks like to me they might have gone down this road. I might be wrong. Maybe the French have a different system in mind to play the box, but it looks like to me they're saying, I will fight fire with fire. We lost to that. Let's become a counter-attacking, blitzkrieging, super, quick switch on, but don't play too much with the ball. Don't build 10 phases. Don't, just go kind of the full Bach counter. And that's to be seen. We'll see what happens the next 3 years. The greatest fear I have is that the depth and health of the French is going to overwhelm some of these realities anyway. If you just build enough depth, enough quality, and you have enough money in your system, and you have enough joy in your system, 6.5 million people watching that match live, and it's ominous, because they're almost being at World Cup fever pitch for the Six Nations, and we're not developing that all the time for rugby championship games, and it could change. But now we're going to go to New Zealand. The time zones, the remoteness of it. It's the Springboks it cannot be soon enough to have these tours with the All Blacks. They need to come quickly. That 4-game, that's really going to help us stay ahead of the pack. That's my summation. It reminds me a little bit when I used to be more of a courtroom trial lawyer. And I'd sometimes have a case where it would come on and I thought, well, I'm not going to win this case. The facts are against me. The law is against me. My client's unattractive. They look shady. I mean, why would a jury decide in my favor? There was this woman who invented a tool. It was for your hair. It was called a topsy tail. She sold 20 million of them in the first month. She was making, $25 million in the first year of selling this tool, which all it did is allowed you to make different hairstyles in your hair. And it was called a topsy tail. It was a hard plastic loop, and you could use it inside your hair to make French braids and stuff. And then you got like $20 and you got like a video with it. It was back in the day where you do that kind of sales. It's a bit of a, it was a bit of a con job to begin with, but it was her invention, her patent, and she was trying to sell it around the world. And she said that my clients took this and then, renamed it and sold it across Hong Kong and China and Argentina and took away, 40 million from her. So she sues and she talks about how she invented the thing by watching a girl in front of her in a movie line playing with a straw from a drink and making a hairstyle with a straw. And she goes, oh, what if I made a hard plastic version of that and I developed it to manufacturing? So it was time for me to cross-examine her. And I was thinking, we're going to lose this case because it looks very much like my clients. They absolutely took the secret and then sold 40 million around the world. They looked like people who would do it. They were like, as seen on TV, kind of infomercial guys. And she told a compelling tale. There was not, how we get around it. So she gets up on the stand and I say, can you remind me again of how you came up with this tool? She tells a story about the straw and the person, la, la, la. And I go, are you sure? And she said, yes. And I go, because I grew up in the Western Cape of South Africa, and I remember it was surrounded by horses all the time. I mean, most of my neighbors had horses. When I go to school, I would walk by these paddocks of people, and the groomsmen, every day, they would groom the horses. They would brush the tails of the horses in the mane. And they had a tool much bigger than yours, but it looked just like it. It's just a big hard rubber loop. And they would twist it and turn it, and they would make the beautiful dressage hairstyles for the horses. And I would just stand mesmerized. Objection, says a lawyer. Why is this guy telling a story about South African horses? And the judge says, nah, I want to hear it. It's fun. So I keep talking about this. And all I'm trying to do is make her mad. And then I said, are you sure? Because I would just stand there looking. I would be, drinking my appetizer, having a little biltong, watching these guys. It was great. And she goes, I don't even like horses. And the whole courtroom got really quiet. This is in Texas. There were 3 legitimate cowboys on the jury. They hadn't even been listening all trial. They just stood up and were like, whoa. It's like you had, insulted the baby Jesus Christ in the Vatican. So she lost the trial, a $40 million trial. She loses it. And, afterwards you're allowed to poll the jury and talk about it, why did you do it? And these 3 guys went we went back in the jury room. We just said, there's no way that a woman who hates horses is going to win this trial. And so she lost the trial on something she had never thought was important. It did not exist in their pre-trial planning. No one could have prepared for that line of questioning. And all I did was just kind of being irritating. I was just telling a story that made her so irritated she made a mistake. I'm reminded of that when I look at a rugby match where I say, France went to Dublin, and Ireland played. Nobody played well. I mean, the best player on the pitch for Ireland was probably Caelan Doris, and he got held up. A number 8 should never get held up over the line. You got to find a way to score that. Everyone played badly. Everyone was rattled. Jamison Gibson Park looked flustered. When did you see Jamison Gibson Park look flustered? Every single Irish player did bad things, made bad choices. It was like an analogy. They blurted out, I don't like horses. Like they almost did that. The referee was upset with Caelan Doris and said, hey, go away. Stop talking to me. Everything went wrong because they got under their skin. And I think And I think that's the way the French have to play against the Boks to really upset us, is to get us out of our skins and say the equivalent of, in rugby terms, I don't like horses, and then you lose. And you know, maybe it's just the analogy there, Peter Steph Toy getting red carded. You know, just things like that have to happen. And so I think we're entering a more sophisticated version of the psychological wars, where the coaches are even better at disturbing each other. I don't believe for 1 second that Fabien Galtier and his pre-match stuff was legitimate and sincere. They didn't think that much about the Intermac band versus the ring room band. That's just noise. They were just trying to get under the skin. I think Dupont coming up early and saying, well, you know, the Irish rock illegally, and planting a seed for that. Now, you know, he kind of had to go, he almost like was crucified on his own cross. But they started talking about that. Gregory Aldrit looked sad when he came to the ref, and he said, Monsieur Ref, but this is not good. My friend is suffering. He's lost his leg, you know. And that, it all seemed like a psychological play. Even when they won, when have you seen a coach and a team be more upset about refereeing after they won? It's just like, I've never seen that before. They're filing protests for the World Rugby, and they're saying, you know, I think that they're building an approach, which is, we want to get inside your heads, you know? This is how Ireland beat South Africa when they shouldn't have. We can sing all we want about Rahasi. They got in our heads, and they are still a little bit. And we got to get them out of our heads. Stop singing that song and just beat them. And I think the French are taking a leaf of that out of the book and saying, you know, let's do proper referee conditioning. Let's do post-match discussions. Let's really try to get, you know, let's disturb people. So I think that's what we're looking at, coupled with the tectonic shift of age and power and pace that they're building. They are a proper opponent. I don't know if they're our rival yet. Our only rival really is the All Blacks. All Blacks would say the same thing about Springboks. But Ireland has definitely overperformed for a while. And now I think the French are saying, we want to be part of that conversation. We would like to be at the seat of the table in World Rugby right there, and we want to be number one. I see no doubt in my mind that the French believe they can take their club supremacy, superimpose it upon country, and develop enough athletes, enough athleticism, enough speed, power, pace, that they win, and they win consistently.
You know, when there's nothing as disappointing if when you want to fight someone and the guy doesn't pitch up for the fight. So you've got all this preparation. The French now will do all this preparation, and they're ready to get under our skins, and we come around and we do something completely different. And Rassie is known for something completely different. You know, 7-1 is he's brainchild effectively. Is there a way that you think Rassie can actually counter this by not doing what they expect us to do and doing something completely unexpected again? So even though they have this plan to get under our skins and that, you know, preparing us, not number one, not allowing them to do that, and secondly, doing something completely different that they didn't see coming. Is that in any way a possibility? I mean, we saw after this alignment, Gavi said that the older players were told to, you know, start, you know, transferring information and IP and everything to the younger players. Where's Rassie going with this team? And do you think he's seeing what you just told us about? And is he going to be able to counter it?
Yeah, what I've heard from inside South African sources is that we still believe we have a peak fitness edge. And this gets pretty technical, but the way that we train to load and overload, anaerobics, and building fitness early and then tapering, that there's a science to that is a holdover from Aled Walters. But also there's some new ideas with our current fitness coach, and that we believe that you cannot live that way for 52 weeks of the year, obviously. But if you point out a 10-week, 12-week period of time, and you say, get ready for that, and you have advance notice, that we still hold advantages there. That no matter what people look like right now, walking around, it's a bit like UFC or MMA or boxing. there is a science to shredding, cutting, trimming, and getting into your fighting shape that is still an edge. There's a Japanese compartment to that, by the way. And so, this idea that you're having a greater collaboration with the Japanese clubs. But that's what I've heard. I've heard that, if the French could finally get over that and have, Miafu, Flamand, Antonio, Alighieri, Marchand, even guys like Aldrit, be at more peak performance in terms of power, dynamism, and fitness, that they would be even more of a problem. And that gets into nutrition, that gets into cultural styles, that gets into how the top 14 is so brutal. And you add the champions on top of it, that, they almost have less of an off season than anyone. But they do seem to have sort of an accumulation of soft tissue injuries that is more disproportionate when compared to some of Ireland, for example. And so some of the top sports science stuff's been happening over in Ireland, but New Zealand also had it for a long time. I think Camp Springbok is actually now viewed as being the pinnacle of that. I mean, there's lots of reasons to be number one in the world, but it's not surprising in a collision sport where you have high load that it also would correlate with some of the best physiological, gym, nutrition, and science. So there's some mystique there that, again, I'm not saying that people walking around all the time are looking like that, but there's that famous picture in 2019, which you could have taken in 2023, where we just get shredded. And there's, we talk about fine margins in sport, and then the minute you talk about one of those fine margins, they go, no, it couldn't be that. I'm like, no, it is. That's how fine margins work. Everyone's really good. Everyone's really powerful. Everyone's really quick. But if you are 1% or 0.5% better, that wins a match. And so I do think peak loading, it's what Warren Gatland used to depend on for so long when he was good, is Wales would be actually almost always the fittest team. And so they were able to, their ceiling was not as high as some of the other teams, but they would hit the ceiling. And so for the French, it's always been, your ceiling is incredibly high. It's as high as, the tombs, the cathedral for Napoleon. But you're not even getting close to it. You're getting too tired too quickly. You're hanging your head too quickly when you get down, and you're not finding a way to ruthlessly, brutally win. That looks like it's changing, and that's why it's scary.
No, so the next frontier is the physical game. Okay, I like that. I have to let you go. That was quite an interesting discussion. I think we're going to get a lot of feedback on this, and I see there's a lot of people asking why are we considering Ireland our rival? Because you only said we only started really seeing them as rivals since 2022. Whole debate going on there, but that's a story for another day. Thanks, Harry. Appreciate that.
Cheers.
It's the Lekker Rugby Pod, only on Megaphone Rugby.